Airbus just posted a 52% collapse in quarterly profit. Its stock has fallen roughly 20% this year. And on paper, that's wiped out somewhere in the neighborhood of $28 billion in shareholder value, at a company that, just months earlier, was sitting on the largest order backlog in its history. Here's the part that should actually worry you if you're an Airbus shareholder, or an airline waiting on a delivery. None of that $28 billion has anything to do with Airbus struggling to sell planes. Airbus has never had more orders. The problem is that Airbus can't get the planes it's already sold out the door because of an engine crisis at a supplier most passengers have never heard of. This is the story of how a hidden defect in a piece of metal, discovered years ago, is still quietly costing Airbus billions of dollars today, and why the company most people assume is winning its rivalry with Boeing is actually bleeding money while it does it. Let's start with the actual math, because this isn't a headline I'm pulling out of thin air. Airbus's market capitalization sat at roughly $138 billion in mid-2026. Its stock has fallen approximately 20% year to date, driven largely by its Q1 2026 results, where revenue dropped 7%, and adjusted operating profit for its commercial aircraft division collapsed 84%, down to just 81 million euros. A genuinely staggering drop for a division that, in a healthy quarter, would be expected to generate a meaningful share of the company's overall profit. Run that 20% decline against a $138 billion market cap, and you get somewhere close to $28 billion in market value that has simply evaporated this year from a company that, at the exact same time, was announcing a record order backlog of over 9,000 aircraft. That's the paradox sitting at the center of this story. Airbus has never had more demand. It has record orders, strong airline interest, and a backlog stretching out more than a decade, and its stock is still getting crushed. Something has to explain that contradiction, and the answer isn't Airbus, and it isn't a lack of customers lining up to buy its planes. It's the company that builds a huge share of its engines, sitting several layers back in Airbus's own supply chain, largely invisible to the passengers who will eventually fly on these aircraft, but very much visible on Airbus's balance sheet. The root of Airbus's $28 billion problem traces back to Pratt Whitney, the American engine manufacturer that powers a large portion of Airbus's best-selling aircraft, the A320neo family, through its geared turbofan engine, and exclusively powers the smaller A220, meaning both of Airbus's most important narrow-body programs carry direct exposure to this single supplier's manufacturing quality. Back in 2023, Pratt Whitney's parent company, RTX, disclosed a serious manufacturing defect: microscopic cracks caused by contaminated powdered metal used to manufacture high-pressure turbine discs inside the engine, discovered during routine inspections rather than after any actual in-flight failure, which is at least the one piece of good news buried in this entire saga. Powdered metal manufacturing involves compressing fine metal powder under extreme heat and pressure to form critical, high-stress components, and even microscopic contamination introduced during that process can create structural weaknesses invisible to the naked eye. The scope of the problem kept expanding as RTX investigated further. What started as an inspection order for around 200 engines by mid-2023 eventually grew to encompass 600 to 700 engine removals, stretching from 2023 through 2026, representing more than a quarter of the entire PW1100G-JM fleet, powering Airbus's A320neo family. At the worst point of the crisis, as many as 650 aircraft sat grounded worldwide simultaneously, parked at airports with nowhere to go, not because anything was structurally wrong with the airframes Airbus had built, but because the engines bolted to their wings needed to come off for inspection, and there weren't enough spare engines or repair shop slots to keep the fleet moving. RTX, has already absorbed staggering direct costs from this single manufacturing defect, with total gross financial impact estimated in the range of $6 to $7 billion. And RTX paid out roughly $1 billion in compensation to affected airlines in 2025 alone. But RTX isn't the one whose stock is getting punished right now. Airbus is, because Airbus is the company that actually has to hand a finished flying aircraft to an airline, and it can't do that without a working engine bolted onto the wing. The human operational cost of this crisis has landed hardest not on Airbus or Pratt Whitney directly, but on the airlines caught in the middle, forced to ground aircraft they'd already paid for, and built entire route networks around. Air New Zealand warned as early as late 2023 that the engine issues could affect its operations for up to 2 years, grounding as many as 4 aircraft at any given time, and eventually needing to ground up to 6 of its A321neo fleet by the end of that year alone. Indian carriers were hit especially hard, with roughly 70 A320neo aircraft grounded across the affected fleet, a significant portion of total operating capacity at a moment when Indian domestic air travel demand was surging. Airlines across multiple continents found themselves scrambling to lease substitute aircraft just to maintain existing schedules, an expensive, temporary patch for a problem with no fast fix available. By late 2025 and into 2026, Pratt Whitney reported meaningful progress, with maintenance and repair output for the affected engine increasing by double-digit percentages year over year, and industry trackers estimating more than 150 GTF-powered aircraft returning to service throughout 2026 alone. But even with that recovery underway, RTX's own leadership has acknowledged the fleet management plan remains an ongoing multi-year effort, not a problem that simply switches off once the worst of the grounding numbers pass. Here's the mechanism connecting an American engine defect to Airbus's collapsing quarterly profit. Airbus can still build the airframe. It can finish the fuselage, install the cabin, paint the livery. What it increasingly cannot do on schedule is bolt a working, fully inspected engine onto that airframe and hand it over to a paying airline customer. Airbus's own CEO described the resulting situation bluntly on the company's Q1 2026 earnings call, calling it a desynchronization between production and delivery. Airbus is building aircraft faster than it can actually deliver them because the engines aren't arriving on time or are being pulled back out for inspection almost as soon as they're installed. The company delivered 114 commercial aircraft in the first quarter of 2026, down from 136 a year earlier, even as its order backlog kept growing. That gap between what Airbus can build and what it can actually hand over to a customer is where the money disappears, because Airbus doesn't get paid in full until an aircraft is actually delivered, no matter how close to finished it's sitting on the tarmac, sometimes quite literally parked and complete, except for a working engine. The relationship between Airbus and Pratt Whitney has gotten tense enough that Airbus has reportedly pursued a formal damages claim against the engine maker over the shortages stalling hundreds of narrow-body deliveries. When an aircraft manufacturer starts pursuing legal claims against one of its own critical suppliers, that's a strong signal of just how much financial pain has built up on Airbus's side of this relationship, and how little patience remains for reassurances that a fix is coming, especially given how publicly and repeatedly RTX has already revised its own recovery timeline over the past several years. Airbus's own production ramp-up target, getting to 75 A320 family jets built per month, has already slipped to the end of 2027, pushed back specifically because of the ongoing engine bottleneck, a target that was originally supposed to be reached years earlier. Pratt Whitney, for its part, is investing $200 million to expand engine component manufacturing capacity in Georgia, adding a seventh forging press specifically to increase output of the critical disks at the center of this entire crisis, projected to boost output of those components by roughly 30%. That expansion isn't expected to come fully online until 2028, meaning Airbus is looking at years, not months, before this bottleneck fully clears. And every quarter between now and then represents another quarter of the same desynchronization between what Airbus builds and what it can actually deliver. While Airbus works through this engine crisis, Boeing, the same company that spent years mired in its own reputational disaster following the 737 MAX groundings, has actually pulled ahead of Airbus in quarterly deliveries for the first time since that crisis began, helped by the FAA finally lifting production caps that had been holding Boeing's own output artificially low for years, while regulators rebuilt confidence in the company's manufacturing quality processes. That's a genuinely remarkable reversal. For years, Boeing was the cautionary tale in commercial aviation, grounded aircraft, congressional hearings, a reputation in tatters, while Airbus was held up as the steady, reliable alternative airlines could count on without a second thought. Right now, in 2026, it's Airbus quietly bleeding billions in market value over a problem largely outside its own factories, while Boeing claws back market share on the back of engine reliability. Airbus currently can't match on a huge share of its own order book. Boeing's own output climbed to 42 aircraft per month in early 2026, after the FAA lifted its previous production caps, with the company targeting 52 per month by 2027 or 2028, putting real pressure on the narrative that Airbus had permanently pulled ahead in the narrow-body race. It's worth noting, Boeing isn't free of its own supply chain headaches either, including its own reliance on the same broader aerospace supplier ecosystem that struggled industry-wide with post-pandemic labor shortages and raw material constraints. But for the specific narrow-body segment, where Airbus and Boeing compete most directly, the engine reliability gap has for now tilted the momentum back toward Boeing at exactly the moment Airbus can least afford it. If this all sounds unusually dramatic for a company with a record order book, it's worth remembering Airbus has actually been here before, more than once, just with a different root cause each time. Back in the mid-2000s, Airbus took $1 billion plus hit tied to delays on both its A400M military transport and its A350 program. Problems serious enough that the company's own co-CEO at the time called it the worst year for Airbus in its life. A few years later, the A400M resurfaced as a financial drag again, with gearbox problems and fuselage cracks forcing Airbus to absorb billions more in charges, alongside separate delivery delays on the A350 caused by something as unglamorous as seat shortages and reportedly faulty toilet doors. More recently, quality problems at a Spanish supplier producing fuselage panels forced Airbus to inspect over 600 aircraft, while a separate software glitch affected roughly half its global fleet, together forcing the company to cut its delivery forecast, even as it insisted its full-year financial guidance would hold. The pattern across nearly 2 decades is remarkably consistent. Airbus's core aircraft designs keep selling. The company's actual vulnerability has repeatedly come from somewhere else entirely. A supplier, a component, a manufacturing process just outside its direct control, quietly eating into the company's ability to actually convert a strong sales pipeline into delivered, revenue-generating aircraft on schedule. The Pratt and Whitney engine crisis is, in that sense, less a unique disaster and more the latest chapter in a very familiar Airbus story, just with a bigger dollar figure attached than most of the earlier ones. Not existentially, no. The order backlog is real. Demand for its aircraft has never been stronger, and this is fundamentally a supply chain and engine reliability problem, not a sign that airlines or passengers have lost faith in Airbus's aircraft themselves. Airbus still expects to deliver around 870 aircraft in 2026 and has stuck to its full-year financial targets, betting heavily on the back half of the year to make up for a brutal first quarter, with CEO Guillaume Faury summing up the company's immediate priority in blunt, repeated terms. Ramp up, ramp up, ramp up. But the $28 billion question hanging over the company right now is simple. How long can Airbus keep telling investors, the planes are selling, we just can't hand them over yet, before that starts to look less like a temporary supply chain hiccup and more like a structural problem the company can't fully control, sitting on the other side of a contract with a supplier that, so far, hasn't been able to fix what it broke? With Pratt and Whitney's own fix not expected to fully materialize until 2028, Airbus may be telling investors some version of that same story for at least a couple more years yet.